Hi, this is Ron Cipcic. In this particular video, we're going to take a look at the derivation of the aggregate supply curve. And this is really the second part of a three-part series on the development of the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. So I'm assuming that you've already watched the aggregate demand video where I developed the aggregate demand model. You'll notice here that I have two models drawn. The model on the left is actually what we would term a short run model, and in the short run we assume that things like technology and worker productivity and things like that have to be fixed. So in the short run the firm can alter the number of workers, but it cannot alter the quality of the workers or the technology workers are working with. It takes longer periods of time to alter things like technology and worker productivity. So we'll assume this in the short run, that the only thing we can do is increase the number of workers, not the quality of workers or the technology they work with. The model on the right side takes a look at what we would consider to be long-run aggregate supply. So you'll notice the model on the left has an upward slope, which means what? Higher prices, and again, this is a general price level. This might be going from a general price level of 100 to a general price level of 200. And we're basically saying the general level of prices have increased. So if prices increase, we're basically arguing that that will lead in the short run to an increase in real GDP supply. We're largely talking about the producing sector being the business sector, because the business sector actually works in a system where prices direct economic outcomes. Whereas in the government sector, prices are not as important. It isn't like government puts a price on a military weapon, on the service it provides to citizens when it provides military or when it provides roads and things like that. All right, so we'll generally here be looking at the behavior of businesses constituting the largest part of the business producing sector. So higher prices lead to higher output, lower prices lead to lower real GDP supplied or lower output. Y stands for real GDP. Real GDP supplied is abbreviated lowercase y sub s. So this is real GDP supplied. And again, the price level is not talking about the price of a particular product, but it's talking about the price of products in general. Now this upward sloping aggregate supply curve, you'll see in just a minute when I go into explaining what goes behind this upward slope, that this assumes that there is what we call a wage lag effect. All right, it assumes a wage lag effect. It also assumes that there's a misunderstanding on the producer's part, or there's trouble. The producer actually has trouble interpreting general price level changes from relative price level changes, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But just make a note that the upward sloping aggregate supply curve assumes that there is something called a wage lag effect. When you come over here to the right side, you see that we have a vertical aggregate supply curve, and that's what we normally draw for long-run modeling. This curve is basically saying that higher prices have no impact on output. Now, we're not saying that output never changes in the long run. Yes, output does in fact change, but what we're saying is prices have no impact on output in the long run. So that leads us to what we would call a vertical aggregate supply curve. So we could note it this way: higher prices have no impact on real GDP supplied. So in other words, if real GDP supplied is actually going to change, it's because there's been a change in something other than price. Likewise, lower prices have no impact on real GDP supplied, and that's what we assume in the long run. Now what we'd like to do, what I'd like to do, is I'd like to actually get into the reasons behind the short run and long run aggregate supply curve. So I want to talk about the wage lag effect. Make a note over here that there is no wage lag effect. You go, I don't know what that is. Well, by the end of this video you will, because I will be explaining this in just a minute. So, in future modeling, when you see an upward sloping aggregate supply curve, you are to assume we're talking about the short run. When you see a vertical aggregate supply curve, you are to assume we're talking about the long run. Okay? Now, let's. I'm going to go ahead and erase this and clear the space here so I can do some more note taking here for you. All right. So what I'll do is I'll divide this space in half, and over here I'll be talking about short run aggregate supply, and over here I'll be talking about long run aggregate supply. Okay, now why is the short run aggregate supply curve upward sloping? We said that on the first page of our notes here, whereas the long run aggregate supply curve is vertical. We know what the what is, we know what the shape is, but now we want to get behind the what and look at the why. And so the first thing we want to look at is what we call the wage lag effect. And the wage lag effect is going to explain this upward sloping aggregate supply curve. So let me just very quickly, I'm going to set up a little model here, T1, T2, and then the nominal wage, which is the wage in current dollars. Let's say it's $15 here per hour on average for the workers. Let's say this is an average wage for workers in this particular economy. And let's say that over time, say we go from year 1 to year 2, time period 1 to time period 2, the wage increases to, say, $20. And that's a percentage change of 33%. It's actually 33.3%. We'll just round that up to 33%. Fairly substantial increase in wages over time. Let's say that the price level over that same time period goes from, let's make it simple here. Let's say it goes from 200 to 400. Now that would be a 100% increase in prices. Prices have effectively doubled. So while wages have gone up 33%, prices have actually doubled. Now you might wonder, well, how could that occur? How could wages lag prices? Clearly wages are going up, but they're not going up as fast as prices. And there's a number of reasons why this could happen. For instance, contracts. Contracts lock workers in to wages for a particular period of time. Those contracts are set up front in the period that they run for. So if you have a 3-year contract, the wages are determined up front. At the time the contract is determined, the negotiators may not have any idea what the price level. In fact, it's very likely they will not know with any certainty what the price level is going to do over the 3 years of the contract. Well, that's one problem. Plus, forget unions for a minute. Forget union contracts. There's custom. The custom is that in the business world, you normally only increase a person's pay once a year. So once you increase their pay, they're locked in for a period of time, say a year or 2 years. Some employers, if you don't bring it up, they won't bring it up. So you lock in a certain pay increase at the beginning of the year, but say prices go up faster than what you thought. Well, it's possible that your wages could lag your prices. Okay, the prices you're facing in terms of when you go to the store, when you go out and buy clothing, when you go out and buy a new car, and all those other things. Okay? Now, if we adjust this data, I'm going to just abbreviate the nominal wage with a W. If we adjust the nominal wage for inflation, we do that by getting the real wage, W divided by P. If we divide 15 by 2, we get 750. So 750 in base year dollars, or in real terms, is the equivalent of $15 in current dollars if prices have doubled. So what's happened to the real wage? Well, if you divide 20 by 4, you see that the real wage has actually decreased. And if you actually were to calculate the percentage change here, that is actually a 33% decrease in the real wage. So it looks to the worker like the workers are looking at their nominal wages and seeing a pay increase, But if you adjust the wage data for inflation, you see that workers are actually taking a pay cut. Okay, so in a world where workers are actually getting cheaper, companies are going to be more inclined to want to hire them. So if the price level goes up, and that increase in the price level drives the real wage down because of a wage lag effect, that will increase the amount of labor demanded. L stands for labor, D stands for demanded. So companies will demand, remember companies are the employers of labor in this case. So if higher prices actually cause a wage lag effect and real wages fall, well, workers are going to seem cheaper to employers, and that will lead to greater employment of these workers, and that will drive real GDP supplied up. Remember, in the short run, we assume you don't have enough time to alter, you do not have enough time to alter the quality of workers, but if you can hire more workers, you can increase your output by hiring more workers. So we can see here that what happened. We can see that the price level actually went up. The price level went up, and that ultimately, through this transmission mechanism here, caused real GDP supply to increase. And again, that leads to our upward sloping aggregate supply curve. That's called the wage lag effect. Now, let's just, as long as we're on the wage lag effect, let's go over here and look at the long run aggregate supply curve. This is an easy comparison to make. In the long run, we assume no wage. If you hear sounds in the background, I just want you to know that there is other production going on in this condo right now. My wife is actually doing some cooking. So while I'm producing this video, she's cooking the food which will sustain me through video 3 and further videos. So if you hear a few noises, it's noise in the kitchen, and my yellow lab is also here eating scraps off the floor. You know, we throw vegetables at him and things like that. He eats very, very well for a dog. Okay, back to our regular programming. So in the long run, there is no wage lag effect. There is no wage lag effect. Well, if there's no wage lag effect, then prices don't affect real GDP supplied. Let's very quickly prove this using the same sort of modeling we just used. So T1, T2, and percentage change. And let's say the nominal wage, W, goes from 15 to 30. So over the time period in question, the nominal wage increases by 100%. Let's say over the same time period, prices go from 200 to 400. So on average, prices have doubled. That's an increase of 100%. So on average, wages have doubled, and on average, prices have doubled. In other words, workers have not lagged prices. And given longer periods of time, you would expect that workers are less likely to be fooled by price level changes, that given enough time, they can catch up if they've fallen behind and make adjustments to their wage demands by leaving a job and finding another job if their current employer will not allow them to keep up with price level changes. So you can see here that if you divide W by P, the real wage doesn't change. 15, excuse me, I just miswrote there. Let's try that again. 15 divided by 2 is going to be what? It's going to be, let's get rid of that. There we go. So 15 divided by 2 is 750, and 30 divided by 4 is 750. So the real wage has effectively not changed, which is another way of saying that is the percentage change is 0. So here prices have increased by 100%, but there was no change in the real wage. The real wage stayed constant. Well, if there's no change in the real wage, businesses are not going to demand any more labor than they're currently demanding if you're basing their demand on the price of the labor. And if there's no change in the labor demanded, there's no change in the amount of output supplied. If we don't hire more workers, we don't produce more output. So in this case, you can see that the higher price has no impact on real GDP supplied. Real GDP supplied stays the same. Hence, we have a vertical aggregate supply curve. Changes in price do not affect real output supplied. Okay, so one reason we can have an upward slope versus a vertical slope is the wage lag effect. A second reason has to do with people misinterpreting the real real prices from nominal prices. And let me give you an example of this. So let me clear this, and we'll start over again. Again, we're going to have a dividing line down through here, and on the left we'll be looking at short run. On the right we'll be looking at long run. So misinterpretation of the price level change. Let me explain this. Okay, no misinterpretation of the price level change. Okay, so let's say, let me just give you an example, T1, T2, and let's say the price of corn, a specific product, is $4 here, and it's let's just say it's $5 here. Let's say that over the same time period, producers think the price level has stayed relatively stable, say at 200. Okay, so they think the price level has actually stayed constant. All right, but in fact, it's gone up double. It's really doubled. Okay, so in effect, the percentage change here is this is a 25% increase in the price of corn, but in effect there hasn't been a real increase. In effect, prices have increased 100%, and this is the general level of prices, which we've been just calling P. But if you divide PC by PG, you get what we would call the real price of corn. In other words, inflation adjusted. This is actually what we would call the nominal price. The nominal price is in current dollars. So in current dollars, during period 1, the price was 4. In current dollars, in period 2, the price was 5, and that's a 25% increase. But over that time period, the general level of prices in general have gone up 100%. So the real price of corn, if you actually check this out, the real price of corn here is 2, and the real price of corn here is actually, that's $1.25. So that's a decrease of, what is that? That's a decrease of 75 cents over 2. So let me get my calculator out and calculate that. So that is $1.25. $1.25 minus 2 divided by 2 equals, that is a 37.5% decrease in the price of corn in real terms. Okay? However, if the farmer misinterprets this, if the farmer doesn't realize that prices have gone up, okay, the farmer may be inclined to produce more. So let's say the farmer doesn't know this, therefore doesn't know this, and is focusing only on this. The farmer is focused on what? The farmer is focused on nominal prices, but not on real prices. Not on real prices. And so, in essence, the price level in general has gone up, and really farmers shouldn't be producing more, they should be producing less, but they're willing to what? They're willing to increase the quantity supplied based on nominal prices, not real prices. So by focusing on nominal prices, not real prices, they actually want to produce more, because the law of supply says if I believe my prices have gone up, that says to me my corn is more valuable in the economy, and I will therefore produce more of it. Now, the real price, or what we would call the relative price of corn, hasn't gone up. It's really gone down. Relatively speaking, corn has gotten cheaper when you factor the price level and the prices of all things. The price of corn has actually dropped over this time period, but farmers do not focus, in this case, on real. They focus on nominal, and they're surprised. They've been fooled essentially by the general price level. In other words, inflation has been higher than they expected. They thought inflation was zero, and it turned out to be double that. Okay? There was a misinterpretation of the general price level change. Okay? Now, if there is no misinterpretation, and we're assuming in the long run that's less likely, given enough time, and usually more time means more information, and also the ability to correct for past mistakes. So in the long run, you're less likely to see this problem. What you're more likely to see in the long run is you're likely to see people not being fooled. Well, if people aren't fooled, let me give you an example here. Now I'm going to kind of fudge this a little bit. If they're not fooled, let's say the price of corn goes from $4 to $8. I'm just using a different example here. And so that's a 100% increase in the price of corn. But at the same time, the general price level is going from 200 to 400, which is 100%. Then the real price of corn, PC divided by PG, would be what? Would be $2 here and $2 here. And so if the farmer is actually focused on the real price of corn, then the real price of corn hasn't increased. Well, even though the price level has increased, the general price level has increased, in fact it's increased by 100%, it doesn't lead to any increase in production. Production doesn't change. The production of output doesn't change. Now remember, this is the production of corn over here, but this could be, we could be talking about all production here, right? All production. So in a world where people are fooled by price level changes, and prices look to be going up, and producers think they're going up when they're not, you're going to get a production response to this higher general price level. But where people are not fooled by the price level change and realize that this is just a general price level change, there's no effect on output. The farmer isn't fooled, and other people aren't fooled, and so you get a vertical aggregate supply curve. Higher general prices in this case have no impact on overall output. Okay, so that's that's a rather interesting that's an interesting phenomenon, and you should be aware of that. Okay, well, this video has really gone on long enough. So what we've really done here is we've distinguished the shapes of the supply curve. In the long run, you're going to have a vertical aggregate supply curve because you have no wage lag effect and no misinterpretation of price level changes. Whereas in the short run, you'll have an upward sloping supply curve because you do have a wage lag effect, or you may have a wage lag effect, and you may have this misinterpretation of price level changes by producers. Okay, we'll conclude with this.